On today's panel, we're talking about the complex issues of subdivisions and heritage overlays. And to guide us through the maze, from projectfacilitator.com.au, Peter Bozinoski; from the Real Estate Institute of Victoria, as always, Robert LaRocca; and Simon Libis from Subdivision Lawyers. Now, Simon, just before we start, that's the name of your company.
It is, that's right.
So this is what you specialise in, subdivisions, I presume?
Well, I'm a specialist in property law, accredited specialist in property law, but my main focus is in relation to all aspects of land development, subdivisions, owners' corporation, off-the-plan sales, things like that. That's the main focus of my practice.
And this appears to be something that, I presume, there was a time when everyone wanted a 1,000 square metre block. But nowadays, a lot of people are looking at it as a valuable way to chop up their assets a bit and make some extra money and get rid of a bit of debt.
Well, I guess the reason it's become such a big area is that since the introduction of the Subdivision Act back in about 1989, that created a lot of flexibility. Before then, it was basically land subdivisions or strata, the old unit type, own your own unit type thing. With the introduction of the Subdivision Act, it enabled an enormous amount of flexibility where you could have mixed-use developments, you could cut off bits of land, bits of airspace, and do it all in one subdivision rather than having to say, we do land this way and strata that way. And you could create owners' corporations and common property in a variety of different ways. So it enabled a lot of flexibility, which fitted in very well with getting away from, as you say, the idea of the 1,000 metre block and enabling to go up and out and share facilities and all those sort of things.
And you've noticed a lot more people looking at doing that in the last 10 years?
Well, that's right. And often the big developments were the ones that we were conscious of the need to have this flexibility. But now we find that the days of just cutting off the backyard and putting another house, they've been around for quite a while. But now there's this added flexibility of being able to build up into airspace and then enable the flexibility of the subdivision legislation to have common facilities and common access and implied easements. And so it has that sort of flexibility that enables a lot of developments that couldn't have occurred before to occur in a way that people can actually access them and use them without having any major problems.
We need to house our growing population, and one of the ways that that's being successfully done is by reducing block sizes and increasing density in the neighbourhoods.
Yes.
And obviously projectfacilitator.com.au, Peter,
Yes.
This has opened up the market for people like yourself.
Absolutely.
To guide people through, because it is complex, the
Certainly.
whole subdivision.
Well, look, I mean, we've turned a passion into a business over a number of years, and what we're finding is a lot of people are looking at the opportunity to subdivide, but I think I must point out there's a misconception out there that the term subdivision and development, people associate development with your larger scale 20, 30 apartments, whereas subdivision is actually the process after you get your town planning permit for your development. So it's a misconception out there as to what, subdivision versus development, etc.
And who are your clients? Who's coming to you to do this?
A lot of our clients are mainly busy professionals. They run their own companies. Some clients have got 100 plus employees, have always wanted to get into subdivision, property development. So we take the guesswork out of that subdivision process and development, and we run it from concept design to completion for them.
So these people are buying properties they will then subdivide, not as much subdividing their own.
Correct, yeah. Look, probably 20% of our work is just the mums and dads subdividing their rear land. A lot of our work is at 3 units, 5 apartments, 10 apartments, etc. And we do a lot of initial planning advice and feasibility studies for people to help them with the site selection and making sure we identify that there are no surprises in the overall overlays, such as heritage overlays, design development overlays, which have specific requirements with what you can and can't do. But also touching on heritage, I mean, that's an interesting overlay that's, I guess, in South Yarra, Richmond, even pockets of Eaglemont, Ivanhoe, etc. Although there's a heritage overlay placed in certain areas, doesn't necessarily mean you cannot build or you cannot develop.
And that's a case too of asking the question, isn't it? You've got to actually, that's where the process starts with council, I suppose,
Yes.
and things like that. Is heritage overlay, as time goes by, what becomes heritage overlay?
Well, I mean, what is heritage, really is a very important question when you're looking at that, because heritage is often misunderstood as just the old stuff, but it's got to be more than just the old stuff in our society. It's there to protect unique styles and have them available for future generations to see how our housing has changed and how our communities change. So, it's just as relevant to have a house that was built a bit more rarer 10 years ago on the heritage register as it is one that was built 100 years ago.
I might just add that with the heritage overlay, people think that, well, I'm in a heritage overlay, I cannot develop it. Well, no, it's saying you're in a heritage overlay. You need to be sympathetic with your development to neighbouring properties that might be actually on the heritage register. And this information could be obtained online on the planning scheme website, and seeing which properties is clearly in the schedules of the heritage overlays.
So it's about consultation. So much.
Absolutely. You really need to get specific advice as to what the overlay specifically talks about.
And if council says no, that isn't the end of the line.
Certainly not. It's not the end of the line. Council will have their heritage internal consultant advisor. Hence, you need to engage your heritage consultant and subsequently work with council. But don't forget there is the option of going to VCAT and taking your case further. Because sometimes, obviously, council will take that more conservative approach, and it is. Town planning is a very subjective topic.
And Simon, heritage overlay from a legal point of view, it just does seem to be one of these things. People find it very, they feel very affronted when they're not allowed to paint the colour they want, or they're not allowed to change something, but the law is very specific in what you can and cannot do.
And I think as long as you're aware of it, I mean, a lot of people complain that they can't do certain things, but in most cases you're very aware at the time you buy or start developing a property. The information, as Peter pointed out, is quite readily available. And I think as long as you work within those restrictions, and as you pointed out, it's not like you can't do anything with it. I mean, you look at a sort of a fairly topical and maybe controversial development of the Windsor. I mean, the Windsor, you can't touch the outside of the Windsor, but you can still do all that stuff behind it. So the developers have still got a lot of flexibility. But the important thing with any development is that before you start, you check all these things out, whether it's in planning, and part of planning, of course, is the heritage overlay, and there's a whole lot of other things you've got to look at. And when you've looked at all those things, then you make a decision what sort of development you can do.
The Esplanade Hotel in St Kilda, where they've built the large apartment block at the back, it's such an iconic place, but they have managed to do it all over.
That's right. So it doesn't stop you doing it; it just manages. It just makes sure you can't interfere with the heritage area.
And this is where people butt heads with council. And Robert, we're going to out you here for your past because you are a former mayor.
That's right. So
you would have been. How old were you when you were mayor?
I was a sprightly 28-year-old at the time.
28-year-old mayor of
Moreland.
Moreland.
Heritage excited a lot of people, and it still does, because council comes along and says, well, we'd like to consider a heritage overlay on your house. And all of a sudden they go, what does that mean for me? And I found that when councils did that, there was a group of people who were really happy about that, because they saw it as protecting their streetscape, and they saw that as protecting the value that was inherent in their location, because they liked the look of it. Then there were a group of people, of course, who went, don't do that to me, because you're restricting what I can do. Like you talked before, what I can do with my property in the future. And so it was a very contentious and difficult area. And I think it's important that people actually understand that heritage doesn't mean you can't do something. It means you've got to ask the council. And there will be extra fees involved in going through that process. But on the other hand, it also has a role in protecting what an area looks like, and that's part of what people like. So it's a difficult area.
Were you a popular mayor?
I'll leave that for the people to decide, as I think you've best said.
Were you re-elected?
I was re-elected after being mayor. Popularity is a good question, because the first thing I had to do as a councillor was go to we were trying to put a heritage overlay over half of Pascoe Vale South, and most of them turned out to this meeting, and there were a lot of them who were very, very unhappy with me at that stage.
Were you wearing a bulletproof vest?
No, I was not.
No. Hopefully that has helped you sort through the maze of subdivision and heritage overlay. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Your Highness. What do we call you as a former mayor?
Mr Mayor was what they called.
Do you harbour any more political ambitions?
Not
Can we launch you
no.
into state parliament or something?
I'm enjoying what I'm doing enormously.
All right. That's it from the panel for this week.